So we're out here in beautiful sunny Acapulco, Mexico for Anarchapulco. I'm here with Mr. Sterling Lujan, talking about how to be a relational anarchist. So can you tell me a bit about the philosophy or the ideas that come into that?
Yeah, I would be more than happy to do that. Relational anarchism is this idea that if we can build connections with other people, if we can leverage our empathy and our ability to use compassion while we're interacting with other people, we are already going to be on a path for creating anarchistic societies. In this philosophy or doctrine of relational anarchism, I have this idea that's referred to as the relationalist ethic. It's just a loose construct or idea that I considered within relational anarchism. And all it means is every time that we interact with people in a positive, compassionate, and empathetic way, then we are already being nonviolent and non-coercive, which is exactly what anarchists are after. That's what we want to achieve. We want a stateless society, and in my mind, the best path to a stateless society, or to the non-aggression principle, as a lot of voluntarists like to call it, then we can leverage this relationalist ethic and leverage our very human qualities, our very human features to get there.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So it's all about building connections with others. Like, of course, in a society without government, people would have to have strong communities so they can work together and respect each other. So we can start building that right now. That's the idea, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another component to that. In order to build those communities, in order to form relationships, we have to have very good communication skills. And I think that a lot of anarchists currently right now seem to lack some of the basic communication skills, because when they try to persuade or convince people of our philosophy or of their philosophy, it often comes across as hostile or very aggressive, some people would say. And I think that if we are able to understand our own emotional content, that's this idea of emotional intelligence, then we can also understand the other person's emotional content. We can help downregulate their negative emotions, and we can find common ground with those people so that we can build the kind of anarchist communities and societies that we want to build. And I think that is of the utmost importance. So it's all about prior to building these relationships, or in order to build these relationships, you have to have the communication, you have to have self-awareness in the form of emotional intelligence, and you also, another topic we can discuss, you also have to have an understanding of your own human neurology, right? And when I mean human neurology is, I mean we have to understand what triggers us, right? We have to understand this notion of the fight or flight response. And the fight or flight response is a human neurological mechanism that's left over from our deep evolutionary past. And essentially what happens when we get into an argument with people, or we try to convince people of our philosophies and they get triggered and upset, their brain releases a neurohormone referred to as cortisol. And what happens, cortisol floods the brain, and at high enough levels, cortisol can actually impair learning, it can impair human connection, and over the long term, high levels of cortisol can be indicative of trauma, and it can also damage protein synthesis in the brain.
We need to take care of ourselves, I guess, in order to help other people.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to take care of ourselves. Especially we have to have deep understanding. So I think self-exploration is super important, and that right there will help us interact with other people to a greater degree, and will mirror that relationalist ethic. It will mirror exactly those traits so that we can communicate better and that we can empathize better with the other person. So it's all a part of this cycle of communication, understanding neurology, understanding emotional intelligence. And to me, that's the key to building anarchist societies. The key is not using these really heavy-handed logical arguments, constantly citing the economic structures and problems with society. I think those things are important. I think that's a different strategy. I think what we're doing here is a different method that is more well-rounded insofar as getting a whole different group or whole different spectrum of people involved in anarchism who would be turned off by the other methods.
Yeah, great. Yeah, well, that's a lot of the time. Like I've fallen into this trap of having these internet debates, and I present these logical cases and say, well, and try to find the contradiction through like a sort of Socratic method, and present people their own contradictions. But of course, people don't really like seeing their contradictions. I like it sort of when people present the Socratic method to me, but we can't expect regular people to enjoy being pressured like that, because it's not comfortable. So what can we do? Like if we get into a situation, I mean, especially in an internet debate, or if you're talking to your family around the Thanksgiving table or whatever it is, how do you begin a conversation about anarchy or about freedom or limited government or anything like that, in a way that's going to be very communicative?
Right. Yeah, that's a really good question. Usually it's been a little different for me because I make videos online, and I also write a lot and do a lot and bring out a lot of material and content. So a lot of times people will come to me and they'll ask me about my ideas. That's usually how conversations start with me. And usually when they start asking me about my ideas, I try to gauge how they come across to me, if they're receptive to those ideas or if they're more aggressive. And for the sake of argument, of course, we're going to assume that they're more hostile or aggressive. And so I read that. I pay attention to their body language. I pay attention to what in communication psychology we refer to as paralanguage. That's the inflection, tone of voice. I pay attention to their proxemics, and that just means how close they are to me or how far they are to me, because that provides a lot of information about how they are internally, what their internal awareness is like. So I pay attention to all those things, and if I notice they're being real hostile, I sort of move away from the topic of anarchism just for a moment. I may try to find common ground with them. I may try to find something that we have in common, maybe with what they were saying. It may have to do with anarchism. It may not have to do with anarchism. But it's at that point we can find common ground through using these different communication tactics that we can finally start to move into the realm of anarchism. And we may not even have to, because like I said, if we're already getting along in a peaceable fashion, they're already starting to understand anarchism on a subconscious level because they're living it. Of course, that's not to say that providing them with the logical material is also important. I do that too, and I think people should definitely do that, but also keep these communication tactics in mind. Learn how to approach people, learn how to look for triggers. If we just get hostile with people, if we just get mean and nasty with people, it's going to trigger that fight or flight mechanism, like I said. And if we don't know how to downregulate people and work with that, we're basically going to turn them off to the philosophy overall. They're going to think we're just super huge assholes, and they're not going to want anything to do with us. So that's the method that I take and what I try to do to accomplish freedom.
Yeah, it's kind of a complete reversal, because you said you get people to come to you, so you kind of put the honey out there and get people interested.
Yeah, that's a really good thought. It reminds me, a lot of people have actually come to me not just because of the anarchist content strictly that I put out, but also the compassionate communication content that I put out. Matter of fact, one guy found my compassionate anarchism page, and he just acknowledged how we were treating each other in the compassionate anarchy page, and then he started to sort of consider the anarchistic ideas from this more compassionate and empathetic angle, and he just absorbed all the other anarchist ideas naturally, and the next thing you know, he was a full-blown anarchist by way of compassion and empathy and human connection, rather than this nasty vitriol, hate-speaking, basically the nasty hate that is occurring altogether and that is causing a lot of people to be turned off to anarchism in general. So that's how this individual found me, and I just think it's such a positive thing. We should focus on that.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess a lot of people get caught in this trap. My friend Katie told me when she was converted to an anarchist, this guy would just beat her over the head with it for like a year, talking about economic arguments or saying things like, well, you don't have a right to water or food or something like that, or it's the and that's totally for a lot of people, that's totally the wrong way to go about it. So but like you said, by forming common ground, forming connections, people are going to be open to this.